Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my special guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Bob Cowell, a native Iowan and plant scientist, traveled the world over in search of wild alfalfa to hybridize and develop. His searches led him to such disparate places as Siberia, Alaska, New Zealand, Australia. Receiving his agronomy degree from Iowa State, a master's in plant science from the University of Illinois, Bob obtained his PhD from Purdue University in 1947. World War II intervened during his schooling, and he was sent to the Pacific and worked in intelligence under General Douglas MacArthur. He was employed for many years in research for Northrop King Seed Company. Henry Wallace, vice president under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, owner of the Wallace Corn Company, later known as Pioneer Seed Company, was a friend and college classmate of Bob's father. Henry Wallace would be a guiding force in Bob Cowell's life. Another chapter in Bob's story has made him a public figure in our community. For 5 years, he served as a school crossing guard, first at Roosevelt and now at Hoover Elementary School. If you've ever traveled on First and Court Street during school hours, you'll be greeted by Bob with a huge smile and a friendly wave, and that's rain or shine. As a plant scientist, it's not surprising that his hobbies include gardening and building bird feeders. Bob and his wife Mildred raised 3 children, Robert, Richard, and Barbara, and there are 8 grandchildren. Welcome to One of a Kind, Bob, and I know your story begins in Eldora, Iowa, where you were born in June 1921. Your parents were dairy farmers, I read.
Right.
What lifelong habit, if any, did you get from being raised on a dairy farm?
Getting up early in the morning. I've carried that all of my life, and in fact I worked my way through Ames in the dairy farm. But I've always gotten up between 4 to 4:30, but I've kind of gotten lazy lately and made it 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. Tell me about your early schooling in Eldora.
I went to a country school for the first 8 grades. It was a 2-story school, and we had the first 4 grades on the first floor and the next 4 on the second floor. And I was very fortunate. We had two different teachers, of course, and they had stayed at our house.
They lived with you
yes,
in your family?
Yes, they lived in our family home. So really I had a private tutor all of the way.
And they watched that you did your homework.
Oh, yes.
That's why you got through Iowa State in 2 years instead of 4.
That's right, because I was taught how to study, and I was fortunate to have what you might say a few brains, but back in those days we were able to go 12 months of the year and carry full schedules.
You mean at Iowa State?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about your connection with Henry Wallace and why he made such a big difference in your life.
He got my father interested in growing the first hybrid corn while it was still experimental. So consequently, he was to the farm quite often. And he noticed my interest as far as what they were doing. And as time went on, and I was in about my junior year of high school, he began to talk seriously to me about what I was going to do in my life. And by the time that I was a senior, he had definite ideas that I was going to go to Ames and become an agronomist.
How did your father and Henry Wallace meet?
They were classmates at Ames, and ended up in the rooming together, and they just developed a fast friendship that went on the rest of their lives.
What was your father like, Bob?
I guess I'd just have to say a typical farmer, a hard-working gentleman, and a very much of a family man.
Yes. And when he passed away, then your mother sold the farm to a hired man?
Yes, yes. And, well, that was, we stayed there for about 3 years afterwards. And then the hired man took it over, and we moved to town.
Is that why you decided to pick alfalfa? Yeah, I was trying to think, why of all the seeds to hybridize, why because is that because of a dairy farm and that's what the cows eat?
Oh yes, yeah. Of course, if Henry Wallace had really had his way, I'd have been in developing corn. But I got the interest in alfalfa. Of course, back in those days, it was clovers. It was pretty much what we had. But as Dr. Peer at Ames guided me more or less into the alfalfa. And then once I determined my doctorate work, I definitely was very much wrapped up in breeding alfalfa.
Now, you went to Illinois for your master's, and then you started at Purdue, and World War II broke out. Tell me about this part of your story. I found it very fascinating that you were sent to the Pacific and worked in intelligence, and you were under General Douglas MacArthur's command.
Yes. I guess the reason I got there was more of my score on the entrance tests. But once I got over there and put into intelligence, one thing led to another, to which there are many fields in the intelligence, but I ended up in going by submarine to various islands that we were making plans on. And I never went alone. There were always 2 to 4 of us going.
Were you scoping out Japanese movements?
Oh, yes. We wanted to know how many Japanese were there, where they were at, and how they moved around. And we wanted to know as much about them as we could. And we, depending on what was involved as to whether we were going to be there 2 days or a week. But we had a very strict schedule that we were to be back at a given point at a given time.
And your home base was Brisbane?
Well, that's where it started out, and then Hollandia, New Guinea was the next, and then Manila in the Philippines.
Do you think that's where you got some of your love of travel?
Oh, yes, very definitely, because I hadn't done any traveling up to then. Oh, yeah. And as long as I'd been working on alfalfa on my doctorate, that's really developed an interest as to wherever I was at.
Now, how long were you in the Pacific during World War II?
3 years.
3 years. And there's a story, tell me about when you landed on, was it Leyte in the Philippines? What happened to you?
Well, we had done scouting. We were about halfway through our mission, and we bedded down in a patch of 8-foot tall grass, and never heard anything. Woke up the next morning, here was a Japanese company just about 80 feet from us, 80 to 100 feet, but we couldn't see where their guards were at. So we didn't dare move or we'd rustle the grass. So we laid there for almost 3 days. We would call it 3 days. And we couldn't do anything at all. And we ate the food we had in our pockets, and that was it.
So then what happened? I mean, after 3 days.
They moved out, thank God, and we were able to get out of there.
How many were with you?
There were 4 of us.
4 of you?
3 other fellows, yeah.
So was that the closest you came to? That was pretty close.
That was close enough. We had a couple other instances, but that one was the one that tied us up the most. The others were just a bush type thing.
Did you ever meet MacArthur?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, every one of these operations that we went out on, we answered to him when we came back. Oh, yes.
How did he treat you?
I guess I'd have to say I was one of the most fortunate people because I have a tremendous respect for the gentleman, and I never had a cross word from him, he or the fellows that I worked with. He was considerably different to us than he was to other people as such, but he still remained aloof. He was a man that you didn't develop friendships with. He was straight and aloof, but you could have his respect where others didn't.
So you came back from the Pacific and went back to Purdue and got your PhD. And then what happened in your story?
Well, then I went to work for Northrop King, and
Is their main office, excuse me, in Minneapolis?
Yes. And it's an entirely different company now than what it was then, but that's beside the point. But I got into the breeding work, of course, and as time went along, we became more and more interested in obtaining seeds of all varieties we could, so that, because from different countries you can bring those seeds together in crossbreeding and come up with the new varieties. And that's what got me started in traveling all around the world, trying to find what we wanted and developing varieties in those countries too.
How long does it take to find a seed, develop it, and then get it on the market?
You got to figure at least 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. Because it takes so much time to find the varieties that you want to, that will do the best in matching. And in today's computer world, that helps a lot. We didn't have that in those days. But it took generally 10 to 15 years.
So, like when you went to Russia in the 50s, this was you were lucky to get in Russia.
Oh, yes, I was very lucky.
Did you take your family?
Oh, no. I was only there for about 2 weeks.
So where did you go in Russia, and where did you know where to go to look for the alfalfa seed?
When I was at Purdue, there was a Russian in the plant science too, and I developed an excellent relationship with him. And we had always corresponded over the years, and when it was determined that we'd like to get this particular alfalfa out of Siberia, which was one of the old original alfalfas, I wrote and told him and asked him if he could get a clearance for me and if he could go with me as such. And he was finally able to get the clearance, and I flew over there, and I'll tell you, I never spent 2 weeks in my lifetime that I was more scared. Because
Were they followed by the KGB?
Oh, yes. We had 2 men on us 24 hours a day. And I'll never forget when he met me at the airport, he came out to the plane. And as we got down away from the plane and no one around us, he says, "From here till you leave, we say nothing about either of our governments or any of the police forces or anything at all, 24 hours a day. We just talk about the business, and that's it."
Did you find the seed inside
Oh,
the
yes,
stick?
we found it.
And so what happened? You brought it home?
Yes, and the coincidence was, then I went up to Alaska, and I found the same blooming seed right there that had come over from Russia back.
When there was a landmass
yes,
connecting Alaska.
Yes.
Weren't you, that was quite thrilling, wasn't it, for you?
Oh, yes, it was very thrilling, because we didn't dream that we'd ever find anything like that up there, and it was strictly by accident that we found it, and led us on the search. In fact, the winter suit that I just wore, I got that up there because at the time I was there, they had a real cold snap of 90 below, and I had to have something to do.
Oh, just a mere 90 below. How long were you up in Alaska searching for the...
Well, I was up there 2 weeks at one time, and then I went back up again about 2 years later for about a month. But
and you also went to Australia looking for this alfalfa seed.
Well, the Australia part of it was after I'd had the heart attack and been retired. Then I went down there on my own and looking for some varieties that I could develop on my own and market down there, which I did.
So you did.
Yeah.
And where did you do the research? In Iowa?
Yes, initially here, and then I took it down there and made an agreement with a company down there to test it for me, and then I made various trips there
to Australia.
Yeah,
Are they,
yeah.
and they're using it, and,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and it's harvesting, and
Yeah.
it's yours. Is it your name on the
Well, I had the patents, but the patents have run out now, and I've turned it over to the company because they were so good that I'm to the age where I don't need it, and they've taken it and continued on.
Bob, you must have a lot of patience. I mean, research, that's what it's about. A lot of, as my research assistant Suzanne said when she talked to you, she said, you know, his work requires delayed gratification. You know, we all are into this, we want it now, and you had to delay the results and wait. And how did you do it? Did you have a plot of land? First you did it inside the greenhouse.
Oh yes, inside a greenhouse.
Then what? Tell me, take me through the steps.
Then you plant it in little strips, well, like in a garden, in a garden plot, and watch, study it, and determine if it has a possibility. Then you get enough seed harvested from it that you will then put it out into farm plots that are large enough that they will harvest by machine and give you the data as such.
And this all takes 10 years about.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And a lot of failed efforts?
Yeah, oh, there's more failed efforts than success by far. If I may tell you about how you do, you'll take an alfalfa plant that has hundreds of flowers on, and you must pollinate every one of those flowers, cover it, and then pollinate until you've got all the flowers on that plant done or taken off. Because every flower on that plant must be the same and not have any foreign pollen on it at all. And that's
How do you do that, with an eyedropper?
have you ever seen the little magnifying things at the
For
jeweler?
glasses?
Yes. You put that on unless you got 100% eyes, and take a little, like a toothpick, some type of a pick, and then take the pollen off the stamen and put it onto the next one. And it's tedious work, but patience wins out.
That's wonderful. You mentioned that Northrop King moved you around a lot. You and your 3 children and family moved all over the United States, and the home base was Minneapolis, and then you had this heart attack and moved to Iowa City, and that was over 20. So you've been a resident of Iowa City 22, 23 years.
Longest I've ever lived in a place in my life.
Are you glad you came?
Oh yeah, because that's where I met Mildred. And it's very gratifying to be back here because it's a city that has everything you could possibly want.
Well, you know,
except the warm weather in the winter.
Right. Well, and you know about that because maybe people know you because they have crossed on First Avenue and Court Street. How did you decide to come out of retirement and become a crossing guard?
I had a friend on the police force, and I got 5 of them living in my area. And they were short a crossing guard over at Roosevelt, and my daughter was living here at the time, and so she suggested that maybe they should contact me. And Steve came out, and he says, "You're going to be a crossing guard." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, make a story short, he says, "I'll tell you." I said, "No, absolutely not." He says, "Well, let's just put it this way. Every time you back out of that driveway, you're going to get a ticket for something." I says, "You couldn't." He says, "I will." So I said, "All right, I'll satisfy you. I'll take it for 30 days. If I like it, all right. If not, you got it back." That's the end of the story.
Well, obviously you liked it.
Oh, I loved it.
And for 2 years you were at Roosevelt.
Well, 1 year.
Oh, 1 year at Roosevelt.
And 4 over here.
4 at Hoover.
This is my 4th year.
Well, I happen to drive past you on Mondays, and it's just so comforting to see you there, and you're in there when it's sleeting and snowing and ice, and that's when you wear that outfit
That's
from
right.
Alaska, 90
That's
below.
right.
You've needed it this winter. What did the children say to you? Do they chat with you on nice days?
Oh, yeah. Even on the bad days, they will. And, of course, the girls get the hug and the boys get the fives. But we always greet each other with some type of hello and kidding each other, this type of thing.
They call you Bob?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They don't dare call me anything else. I get
Not Robert, not Mr. Cowell, but Bob.
That's right. But they, I will have to say, they treat me with a great deal of respect. And I kind of bribe them every Christmas. I give them a candy bar. And they're just wonderful children. And I've found that if you treat them fairly, they'll treat you fairly. And I enjoyed this tremendously.
I bet you haven't missed many days.
Well, I'm missing today.
Okay, today, and somebody's covering for you.
Yeah, and then I missed one other day because I hemorrhaged in the morning right in bed before I got up, and so I had to go to the hospital. But
other than
that's about it. I've had almost
lucky
a perfect
kids.
record.
Lucky kids. Now tell me about your lucky kids. You have 3 children who traveled all around and became world citizens. What are they doing and where are they living?
Dick is living here. He is an electronic engineer, and he's working for a firm out of Des Moines at the University Hospitals on electronic stuff. I don't know. And then Bob is an FAA flight inspector for Federal Aviation down at Nashville, and he monitors the safety programs and writes the safety programs for Federal Express, and then flies literally all over the world with their flight crews to check them out. And then Barbara is her field is physical therapist, but she's in Greeley, Colorado. Her husband is a nurse in the emergency at the hospital there, and then she's with the police force as a called in when there's accidents that the people need to be counseled with, and she does that.
Well, Bob, in all of your travels all over the world and in the United States, has there been a favorite place that you left your heart or that you could have moved to?
Oh, yes, New Zealand.
Why
That's
was
number
that?
one, and then Australia is close too. Because in New Zealand, it is a pastoral society that's a very quiet society. The people are so sincere that they'll meet you as a stranger and invite you to their home. And I'm talking about whether they're in the city or the farm. And you don't take that lightly. And they want you to stay overnight and all of that. And they sincerely, anything they say, they're sincere about. And it's just a whole different world.
Hospitality is from the heart, it sounds like.
Would you believe there's 10 times more sheep than there are humans?
Yeah, I read that. And what do sheep eat? Do they eat alfalfa?
Well, yes,
Do they?
but that is mostly grass there because it's so hilly that they just they try to interseed alfalfa into it and other legumes, but it's where they're doing the pasturing there, that's about it.
Well, I heard that you're about ready to start another chapter in your life, that something exciting is going to happen, that you're going to get married in a few months. Congratulations.
Yes, I met a very dear lady. In fact, the coincidence of it was that they lived within 2 blocks of us when we lived on Friendship back in the 60s, and we didn't even know each other. But she has 3 children here, and we just seem to have hit it off, and I need somebody to keep me in line.
Have you told the children yet?
Oh my God, we told them right at the very beginning.
And how about the children at Hoover? Do they know that
Oh, yes.
you're
Oh,
going to
yes.
get married?
Yes, I was told I had to have the wedding at Hoover, but they...
Are you
that's
getting
not
married
gonna
at
be.
Hoover?
No,
you're not.
no.
And you're getting married, I read, on your birthday, so
Yes.
in June. So that's wonderful. Now, you love to garden. That's
Oh,
not
yeah.
a surprise. What kind? Are you a vegetable garden, flower gardener?
Well, I'm really both, but mostly vegetable. I don't have a garden large enough to have a whole lot. I have the peas, beans, and tomatoes, beets, lettuce, etc. But it keeps me going, and then, of course, I do some flower gardening.
Would you urge young people to go into agronomy now in 1994?
Oh, yes. There is so much to be done in the future. We developed hybrid alfalfa, but it never became what it should be because it was too difficult. But now they're working on tetraploiding, diploiding, which is doubling, tripling chromosomes. And there's a tremendous amount of work there to be done. And the whole thing is working on the sustainability part of that.
And I can see when you said, oh yes, that you love your field.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Bob, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I appreciate you coming today. And the children had somebody from the police station crossing them today, Ray, helping them
That's
cross.
right.
So you'll be back tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Thank you for being my guest on One of a Kind. My guest has been Bob Cowell. His fascinating career as a plant scientist took him throughout the world, searching for wild alfalfa to develop and hybridize. His research was very difficult, requiring patience, tolerance of failed efforts, and delayed gratification. His efforts eventually led to a hybridized seed that he marketed for commercial uses. Bob worked for many years for Northrop King Seed Company. Respected in his field, he was asked to speak 3 times to the National Agronomy Society. His story includes his work in intelligence during World War II for General Douglas MacArthur. Based in Brisbane, Australia, he traveled throughout the Pacific Islands gathering information on Japanese troop movements. Bob has become a familiar figure in Iowa City as that dependable and friendly crossing guard for Hoover school children. He is a true friend to our young people. His story is one of dedication, determination, patience, hard work, adventure, and risk-taking. A remarkable story. He's a remarkable man. Bob Cowell is one of a kind.